The moment I walked into that courtroom, my daughter laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't hysterical. It was worse than that. It was a small, nervous laugh. The kind people make when they think they've already won. My son-in-law, Daniel Royce, sat beside her in an expensive charcoal suit, one hand resting confidently on the polished oak table. But the second he saw me, his eyes dropped to the floor. He couldn't even hold my gaze. That was the first sign something was wrong. Daniel Royce feared very few things in this world. Men like him built their entire lives on intimidation. They smiled while ruining people. They shook hands while stealing fortunes. And yet the moment I entered that courtroom, he suddenly looked like a man waiting for a gunshot he knew was coming. The courtroom itself smelled of old paper, dust, and polished wood. The air conditioner hummed softly above the murmuring crowd. Melissa sat there wearing white, pretending innocence, pretending grief, pretending concern for her poor aging father. Anyone watching would have believed her performance. My own daughter had perfected the art of fake compassion. She placed one delicate hand over her chest and whispered something to her attorney that made them both smile. The judge hadn't arrived yet. The clerks shuffled documents while spectators filled the benches behind us. Most of them were there because Daniel Royce's name attracted attention. In Los Angeles, Daniel wasn't just wealthy. He was known. Luxury real estate, hotels, political connections, television appearances, magazine covers. He built an empire selling the image of perfection. Beautiful wife, beautiful homes, beautiful lies. And according to petition filed against me 3 weeks earlier, I was nothing more than a confused old man suffering from cognitive decline. A burden, a danger to myself, a man unfit to control his own finances. They wanted conservatorship over everything I owned. My accounts, my properties, my medical decisions, my life. The accusation itself didn't anger me nearly as much as who signed it. My daughter, my only child. I still remember the day Melissa was born. I remembered holding her in a tiny hospital room while my late wife Eleanor cried tears of joy beside me. I remembered teaching Melissa how to ride a bicycle on our quiet Connecticut street. I remembered staying awake through fevers, nightmares, heartbreaks, and teenage rebellions. Every sacrifice I ever made carried her name somewhere inside it. And now she sat 20 feet away trying to erase me with legal paperwork. The bailiff finally announced the judge's arrival. Everyone stood. Judge Harold Benton entered carrying a stack of files beneath one arm. He looked exhausted, probably overworked. Another rich family dispute dumped onto his calendar. He adjusted his glasses and began scanning the room absent-mindedly until his eyes landed on me. Then everything changed. His face lost all color. His hand froze halfway toward his chair. The courtroom fell silent as the judge stared directly at me like he'd seen a ghost rise from the grave. The file slipped from beneath his arm and crashed onto the bench. Papers scattered everywhere. One of the clerks rushed forward in panic, but the judge barely noticed. His lips moved slightly before he whispered 2 words, so quietly almost nobody heard them. Black Bishop. My daughter frowned in confusion. Daniel's expression tightened instantly. But I simply stared back at the judge without blinking. 22 years earlier, Harold Benton had been a federal prosecutor in Washington, D.C. Back then, before he wore judicial robes, he had worked one case with me. One case that destroyed the careers of senators, bankers, and a defense contractor connected to international weapons laundering. The newspapers never knew my real name. Nobody outside the department knew. They only knew the code name whispered behind locked doors. Black Bishop, the man who dismantled financial empires without ever stepping into the spotlight. Harold Benton recognized me immediately, and in that exact moment, Daniel Royce realized something terrifying. He wasn't suing a helpless old man. He had declared war on someone far more dangerous than he understood. Melissa noticed the judge's reaction and gave another uncomfortable laugh. "Dad," she said loudly, trying to regain control of the room. "You really should have stayed home today. Stress isn't good for your condition." Condition. That word echoed through my head like poison. I slowly removed my coat and folded it neatly over the chair before sitting down beside my attorney, Evelyn Cross. Evelyn was calm, elegant, and utterly ruthless in courtrooms. Daniel had made one catastrophic mistake when he filed this case. He assumed nobody powerful would stand beside me. Evelyn leaned closer without taking her eyes off Daniel. "You didn't tell me the judge knew who you were," she whispered. "I hoped you forgot," I answered quietly. Across the aisle, Daniel finally forced himself to look at me again. I saw it clearly now. Sweat gathering beneath his collar. Fingers tapping once against the table. Tiny cracks in confidence. Men like Daniel survive by controlling every room they enter. But control had just slipped away from him. The judge cleared his throat shakily and called the hearing to order. His voice lacked the authority it had only moments earlier. Melissa's attorney stood first, presenting their argument with rehearsed sympathy. He described me as isolated, forgetful, emotionally unstable after losing my wife years ago. He claimed I was vulnerable to manipulation and incapable of managing the vast estate left under my control. Melissa even dabbed fake tears from her eyes, while Daniel stared forward pretending concern. Then came the medical report. Their star witness, Dr. Leonard Graves, a private neurologist who supposedly evaluated me twice over the previous month. According to his report, I suffered from progressing dementia, severe paranoia, cognitive deterioration, fabricated delusions. The judge looked increasingly uncomfortable reading the file, because, unlike everyone else in that courtroom, he understood something horrifying. If I truly was who he thought I was, then the word paranoia no longer sounded ridiculous. Evelyn finally rose from her chair. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "before we continue, I would like the record to reflect that my client has never once met Dr. Leonard Graves in his entire life." Silence exploded across the courtroom. Melissa's smile vanished. Daniel slowly turned toward the doctor sitting behind their legal team. The doctor suddenly looked very nervous. Evelyn continued speaking with surgical precision. "Not only did Dr. Graves falsify a neurological diagnosis, but we also have evidence that he received 2 wire transfers totaling $400,000 from an offshore account connected directly to Mr. Daniel Royce." The courtroom erupted instantly. Voices, gasps, chaos. Melissa looked at her husband in complete shock. Daniel's face drained white. And for the first time since I entered that courtroom, my daughter stopped laughing. The courtroom exploded into noise. Reporters standing near the back began whispering furiously, while spectators leaned across benches trying to hear more. Melissa stared at Daniel like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. But Daniel Royce recovered quickly. Men like him always did. Panic lasted only seconds before survival instinct took over. He slammed his hand against the table and stood up so abruptly his chair rolled backward across the floor. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "This old man is trying to distract the court with conspiracy theories because he knows he's losing." But nobody was looking at me anymore. They were looking at him. And Daniel hated that more than anything. Judge Benton adjusted his glasses again, visibly unsettled. "Mr. Royce," he said carefully, "sit down." Daniel obeyed, but barely. His jaw tightened so hard I could see the muscle twitching beneath his skin. Beside me, Evelyn Cross opened a slim black folder and calmly removed several documents. "Your Honor," she continued, "the wire transfers originated from a holding company in the Cayman Islands called Solmere Holdings. We traced ownership through 3 shell corporations before arriving at Royce Development Group." She placed the papers before the judge. The transfers were authorized 11 days before this petition was filed. Melissa looked at Daniel again, confusion turning into fear. "Danny," she whispered weakly. He ignored her completely. "That told me everything I needed to know." My daughter still believed this was about protecting the family fortune. She didn't yet understand Daniel's real problem. He wasn't after my money because he was greedy. He was desperate. There's a difference. Greed makes people reckless. Desperation makes them dangerous. Judge Benton scanned the documents in silence while the fake neurologist, Dr. Graves, visibly sweated through his collar. Evelyn wasn't finished. Additionally, she said, "My investigators discovered that Dr. Graves surrendered his medical license 6 years ago in Nevada following allegations of insurance fraud." A stunned murmur spread across the courtroom again. The judge's expression darkened immediately. "Is that true?" he asked sharply. Dr. Graves opened his mouth, but no words came out. Daniel suddenly stood again. You can't blindside us with this garbage without verification. Sit down, Mr. Royce. The judge snapped harder this time. Daniel slowly lowered himself back into his chair, but his confidence was collapsing now. I could see it happening piece by piece. He had entered that courtroom expecting an easy victory over an old man. Instead, he was losing control in front of reporters, attorneys, and a judge who clearly feared me. Melissa finally turned toward me directly. Dad, her voice sounded smaller now. Why are you doing this? I almost laughed at the question. Why was I doing this? She forged medical evidence against me. She tried to strip away my rights. She sat there laughing while strangers discussed whether her father belonged under supervision like a senile prisoner. And somehow she still believed she was a victim. I looked at her quietly for several seconds before answering. You stopped being my daughter the moment you signed those papers. Her eyes widened immediately, hurt flashing across her face. Good. Pain was the only language she might still understand. The judge called for a 15-minute recess while he reviewed the new evidence. The second his gavel struck, the courtroom erupted again. Reporters rushed outside to make phone calls. Spectators crowded the aisles whispering excitedly. Daniel grabbed Melissa by the arm and practically dragged her into a private hallway near the elevators. He thought nobody noticed. But I noticed everything. I always had. Evelyn leaned toward me quietly. You were right, she said. Roy's development is bleeding cash. How bad? I asked. Worse than we thought. 3 major lenders are preparing lawsuits. 2 projects stalled. 1 federal inquiry into investor fraud. I nodded slowly. That explained the desperation. Daniel wasn't expanding his empire anymore. He was trying to keep it from collapsing. And Melissa? Evelyn hesitated. I don't think she knows. Of course she didn't. Men like Daniel never tell the truth until it's too late. I stood slowly and walked toward the courtroom windows overlooking downtown Los Angeles. The city shimmered beneath the afternoon sunlight. So much ambition. So much corruption. 20 years ago, this view would have energized me. Back then, I hunted men like Daniel for a living. Financial predators. Corporate parasites. Politicians hiding crimes behind expensive smiles. They used to call me Black Bishop because I moved quietly across the board while everyone else focused on louder pieces. By the time they realized I was there, their entire empire was already collapsing. I had buried that life after Eleanor died. Grief changes a man. Losing your wife after 37 years empties something inside you permanently. After a funeral, I walked away from Washington forever. No more investigations. No more covert audits. No more government briefings behind locked steel doors. I wanted peace. I wanted family. So I moved to California to be closer to Melissa. Biggest mistake of my life. A soft voice interrupted my thoughts. Excuse me, sir. I turned slightly. Tyler stood there awkwardly near the courtroom entrance. My grandson, 16 years old, thin, nervous, wearing a wrinkled school blazer like he had rushed there directly from class. Unlike his parents, Tyler still had kindness in his eyes. Grandpa, are you okay? He asked quietly. For a moment, the hardness inside me eased slightly. I'm fine, Tyler. He glanced nervously toward the hallway where his parents disappeared. Mom said you were sick, he admitted, but you don't seem sick. That's because I'm not. Tyler swallowed hard before lowering his voice further. I heard Dad talking on the phone last week. My attention sharpened instantly. Talking to who? I don't know, but he sounded scared. Tyler looked around carefully before continuing. He kept saying if this didn't work, they'd lose everything. There was again, not greed, survival. Tyler, I said calmly, did your mother know about any of this? He hesitated too long before answering. I don't think so. Then he looked directly at me. Grandpa, who are you really? Children notice things adults ignore. Tyler had seen the judge's reaction earlier. He saw the fear spreading through the courtroom. He knew something didn't fit the story his parents told him. Before I could answer, Evelyn approached quickly. Nathan, she said quietly, you need to see this. She handed me a tablet displaying several financial records her investigators had just uncovered. I scanned the numbers once, then twice. Even I felt cold reading them. Daniel Royce wasn't merely bankrupt. He had stolen nearly $80 million from private investors across 3 developments: pension funds, retirement accounts, trusts, ordinary people who believed his promises. And buried deep inside those records was something much worse. A payment chain connected to a federal transportation contract, public money, government money, which meant this case had just transformed into something far bigger than a family betrayal. Daniel Royce wasn't only corrupt, he was federally exposed. Evelyn studied my face carefully. "You recognize something," she said. I handed the tablet back slowly. "I know the names attached to these accounts." "How?" I looked through the courtroom glass toward Daniel, standing in the distant hallway, arguing violently with Melissa. "Because 22 years ago, I destroyed another empire connected to the exact same people." Evelyn went silent. Even she didn't fully understand what that meant yet. But she would soon. The recess ended minutes later. Everyone returned to their seats. Melissa's makeup could no longer hide her panic. Daniel looked furious. But beneath the anger, I saw something far more important. Fear. Real fear. Judge Benton entered again, slower this time. More cautious. He adjusted the papers before him carefully before speaking. "Due to the serious allegations presented to this court, this hearing is hereby suspended pending criminal review of the submitted evidence." Gasps spread across the room again. Daniel shot to his feet instantly. "You can't do that." "I just did," the judge replied coldly. Then his eyes shifted toward me briefly. "Furthermore, this court strongly advises Mr. Royce to retain criminal counsel immediately." Melissa looked horrified. "Criminal?" she whispered. Daniel grabbed her arm again, hard enough to make her flinch. "We're leaving." But before they could move, the courtroom doors opened once more. 2 men in dark federal suits entered silently. I recognized the badges immediately. Treasury Department. Financial Crimes Division. Daniel saw them too, and suddenly the color vanished completely from his face. The entire courtroom went silent the moment the 2 federal agents entered. Even the reporters stopped whispering. Their badges flashed briefly beneath the ceiling lights as they walked down the center aisle with calm, terrifying purpose. One of them carried a leather folder thick with documents. The other never took his eyes off Daniel Royce. I had seen that look before many times over the years. It was a look investigators wear when they already know enough to destroy someone. Daniel understood it too. His breathing changed instantly. Tiny, uneven, controlled panic. Melissa looked between the agents and her husband in complete confusion. "Danny, what's happening?" she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't, because for the first time in his carefully manufactured life, there was no lie ready fast enough to save him. The taller federal agent approached the bench and quietly handed several papers to Judge Benton. The judge reviewed them for only a few seconds before removing his glasses slowly. "Mr. Royce," he said carefully, "these agents would like a word with you regarding an ongoing financial investigation." Daniel forced out a laugh, but it sounded broken. "This is insane. I haven't done anything." The second agent finally spoke. "Then you should have no problem answering a few questions." Melissa grabbed Daniel's arm harder now. "Questions about what?" Again, he ignored her. That was when fear finally entered her eyes for real. Not courtroom anxiety. Not embarrassment. Betrayal. She was beginning to realize her husband had built their perfect life on something rotten. I remained seated quietly while chaos spread around me. Reporters rushed toward the doors, calling editors. Spectators leaned across benches trying to hear every word. Evelyn Cross calmly organized her files beside me like none of this surprised her. In truth, very little did anymore. Daniel suddenly pointed toward me with open rage. "This is because of him," he snapped. "He set this up." One of the agents turned toward me briefly. Recognition flickered across his face. Very subtle, but I caught immediately. So did Judge Benton. The younger agent stepped closer to Daniel. "Sir," he said flatly, "you need to come with us." Melissa stood up, so fast her chair nearly tipped over. "No, absolutely not. There has to be some mistake." Daniel grabbed her shoulders hard enough to hurt. "Melissa," He hissed under his breath. Be quiet. She stared at him in shock. Why are you talking to me like that? He looked away. Wrong move. In moments like these, people reveal who they truly are. Pressure strips away performance. Daniel no longer had the energy to pretend. He loved her. Not when his empire was collapsing in real time. The agents escorted him toward the side exit, while cameras flashed wildly from the hallway outside. Daniel stopped only once. He turned back toward me with absolute hatred burning in his eyes. You think you've won? He spat. You have no idea how many people are tied to this. I held his gaze calmly. Actually, I replied softly, I do. His expression changed instantly. That was the moment he understood exactly who I was. Not the full truth, but enough. Enough to know this nightmare had only begun. The agents led him away without another word. Melissa stood frozen in the center of the courtroom, while reporters circled her like vultures. Questions came from every direction. Mrs. Royce, did you know about the fraud investigation? Did your husband falsify medical evidence against your father? Are you involved financially? She looked completely overwhelmed now. Fragile. Lost. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the laugh. The courtroom slowly emptied over the next 20 minutes. Judge Benton exited through a private door without speaking to anyone further. Evelyn stayed beside me while Melissa remained near the empty counsel table, staring blankly at the scattered papers left behind. Finally, she turned toward me. Dad, her voice cracked. Please, just tell me what's going on. I studied her silently for several seconds. This was the difficult part about betrayal. Even after everything, part of you still remembers the child they used to be. You married a man you never truly knew, I answered quietly. Tears filled her eyes immediately. You think I wanted this? I said calmly, you stopped asking questions because his money made your life comfortable. The words hit her harder than shouting ever could. Melissa sat down slowly like her legs could no longer hold her. He told me the business was struggling, she admitted weakly, but he said it was temporary. Temporary problems don't usually require forged medical reports. She covered her face with trembling hands. Oh, God! Tyler appeared near the courtroom in Trent again, looking terrified. He must have seen the federal agents escorting his father outside. Mom! Melissa looked up immediately and rushed toward him, holding him tightly. Tyler looked over her shoulder at me with confusion and fear. He still didn't fully understand what was happening. Maybe that was a blessing. Evelyn checked her phone suddenly before leaning toward me. Nathan, she said quietly, we need to leave now. Why? Because 3 news networks are already outside. Of course they were. Public disgrace spreads faster than wildfire in Los Angeles. We exited through a restricted hallway beneath the courthouse while reporters shouted questions upstairs. Evelyn's black sedan waited in a secured underground garage. The second we entered the vehicle, she handed me another file. The Treasury agents weren't the only ones moving today, she said. I opened the folder carefully. More financial records, more shell corporations, more hidden accounts. But one name buried inside the paperwork made my blood run cold. Victor Lang. I hadn't seen that name in over 2 decades. Evelyn noticed my expression immediately. You know him. Unfortunately, Victor Lang wasn't just another wealthy businessman. 22 years earlier, he had been one of the most untouchable financiers in Washington. Political donations, defense contracts, offshore laundering operations. The man practically owned senators. Back then, I spent 18 months building a case against him and his associates. We destroyed most of his network. Or so we thought. He's connected to Daniel? Evelyn asked. Not directly. I replied slowly. Which means he's probably the real owner. She went silent. Smart woman. She understood the implication immediately. Daniel Royce wasn't the mastermind here. He was a front man. A polished public face hiding something much darker underneath. Suddenly my phone vibrated once inside my coat pocket. Very few people had that number. I answered carefully. Yes. A familiar voice spoke quietly on the other end. You should not have come out of retirement, Nathan. My entire body went still. I hadn't heard that voice in 21 years. Victor Lang himself. "You sound older," I replied calmly. A soft laugh came through the line. "And you sound exactly the same. Cold, precise, dangerous." Evelyn watched my face carefully while I continued listening. "Your daughter made a foolish mistake," Victor continued. "Daniel made an even worse one. But this doesn't need to escalate. You forged medical evidence to imprison me legally. Collateral damage." The casualness of his tone disgusted even me. "Listen carefully," Victor said quietly. "Walk away now. Publicly claim confusion. Tell the court this was all a misunderstanding, and your family survives." I stared out the car window at the Los Angeles skyline, glowing orange beneath the setting sun. "And if I refuse?" Silence lingered briefly before he answered. "Then people around you start suffering." The line went dead. Evelyn looked at me immediately. "What did he say?" I slipped the phone back into my pocket slowly. The war just became official. The car continued through downtown traffic, while darkness settled across the city. For years I had convinced myself that part of my life was over, buried, forgotten. But evil has a memory, and men like Victor Lang never truly disappear. They wait, they rebuild, they hide behind younger faces like Daniel Royce until nobody remembers the blood underneath the foundation. But Victor had made one fatal mistake today. He threatened my family. And despite everything Melissa had done, she was still my daughter. I leaned back against the leather seat and closed my eyes briefly. Old instincts were returning now. Cold instincts. Dangerous instincts. The kind I buried beside Eleanor 20 years ago. Evelyn studied me carefully before asking the question quietly. "What happens next?" I opened my eyes slowly. "Now," I said, "we stop defending ourselves." Outside the window, Los Angeles glittered like a beautiful illusion. And somewhere inside that city, powerful men were already preparing to erase me permanently. They just didn't understand one thing yet. I had survived this game long before Daniel Royce ever learned how to wear a suit. And if Victor Lang wanted war, then I was finally ready to become Black Bishop again. By midnight, the city looked peaceful from the outside. Los Angeles glittered beneath the dark sky, like nothing ugly could possibly exist inside it. But I knew better. Cities like this were built on hidden things. Hidden money, hidden power, hidden bodies buried beneath expensive foundations. Evelyn's car pulled to the private gates of my property just after 12:30 in the morning. The mansion lights across the lawn were still on. Melissa hadn't slept. Neither had I. The second I stepped inside my guest house, the silence wrapped around me like memory itself. For years this place had been my exile, my quiet corner of the world where I pretended the past no longer existed. But tonight the air felt different. Awake, waiting. I walked toward the back hallway and stopped in front of the hidden biometric scanner, concealed behind my closet wall. One press of my thumb, a soft green light. Then the heavy steel door unlocked with that same mechanical click I hadn't heard in months. My real office waited in darkness beyond it. Screens, servers, locked cabinets, intelligence archives. Every ghost of my former life preserved underground like a sealed tomb. I entered slowly. Monitors illuminated automatically one by one, casting pale blue light across the room. For a long moment, I simply stood there remembering the man I used to be, Black Bishop. The government created the name after a senator compared me to a chess piece during a classified hearing. "You never see him move," the senator had whispered once. And then suddenly the king falls. Back then, entire corporations feared a single encrypted message carrying my signature. Because if I was investigating you, destruction had already begun. I sat at the central terminal and logged into a secure archive untouched for 20 years. Thousands of files surfaced instantly. Financial operations, offshore accounts, political bribes, names long erased from public memory. But Victor Lang's network had survived longer than anyone realized. Daniel Royce was only the newest mask, a disposable public face hiding an empire corruption underneath. Evelyn entered the room behind me quietly and stopped dead the second she saw the hidden office fully lit. "My God," she whispered. "You really were everything they said." I kept my eyes on the monitor. Worse. She stepped closer slowly, studying the walls lined with classified case files and encrypted databases. How many people know this room exists? Before tonight? Nobody. Evelyn looked at me carefully. And now it doesn't matter, because there was no going back anymore. Victor Lang crossed a line when he threatened my family. The old rules no longer applied. I opened several financial records across the screens, while Evelyn reviewed incoming updates from investigators. Within an hour, we uncovered enough evidence to destroy Daniel Royce permanently. Fraud, embezzlement, bribery, shell companies laundering government transportation funds through overseas development accounts. But deeper beneath those records sat the real monster. Victor Lang had rebuilt his empire using stolen pension money and federal infrastructure contracts across 3 states. Billions of dollars hidden behind luxury hotels and real estate companies. This is bigger than corruption, Evelyn said quietly. This is organized financial warfare. I know. Then another file appeared on screen. My stomach tightened immediately. Melissa's name. Evelyn noticed it too. No, she whispered. She's connected financially. I opened the records carefully. Melissa hadn't known about the fraud. That much was clear. But Daniel used her charitable foundation to move money through donor accounts and tax shelters. Legally, she was exposed. Maybe even criminally liable. I leaned back slowly, exhaustion suddenly crashing into me harder than before. He used her, Evelyn said softly. Yes. Will the government charge her? I didn't answer immediately because the truth was ugly. If this goes public completely, probably. Across the lawn, I could see lights turning on inside the main house. Movement behind the windows. Melissa pacing alone through rooms that suddenly must have felt enormous and empty. For the first time all day, anger inside me weakened slightly. No matter what she'd done, she was still drowning now. And Daniel Royce had thrown her into the water to save himself. My secure phone vibrated again. Unknown number. I answered instantly. Nathan. Victor Lang's voice sounded colder this time. Less patient. You disappoint me. That happens often to criminals. He ignored the insult. Federal agents raided 3 of my offices tonight. Good. You think this ends with me? His voice hardened dangerously. There are judges involved. Politicians. People much more powerful than Daniel Royce. I glanced briefly toward the courthouse documents scattered across my desk. Then I suppose they should start worrying too. Silence lingered several seconds before Victor finally spoke again. You always did enjoy burning entire systems down. Only infected ones. His breathing sharpened slightly. Anger. Fear. Maybe both. You lost once before, Nathan. My eyes narrowed instantly. Careful. Your wife died while you were busy saving the world, he continued quietly. Maybe if you spent less time chasing men like me, she would have had more time left. The room went completely still. Evelyn looked at me immediately, sensing the shift in my expression. Victor had just committed the worst mistake possible. He brought Eleanor into this. Listen to me carefully, I said softly. My voice had become something colder now. Something even Evelyn had never heard before. For 20 years, I buried the man who hunted people like you. I buried him because my wife deserved peace during her final days. But tonight, you just dug him back up. Victor said nothing. You threatened my family. You mocked my wife. And now I'm going to do what I should have finished 22 years ago. Then I ended the call myself. Evelyn stared at me silently for several seconds. What are you going to do? She asked quietly. I stood slowly from the desk and walked toward the massive window overlooking the dark property outside. Somewhere beyond the hills of Los Angeles, Victor Lang was probably already preparing escape plans. Offshore transfers, private flights, political favors. Men like him always believed money could outrun consequences. But they forgot something important. I had spent my entire life learning how predators hide. And once I started hunting again, I never stopped. Tomorrow morning, I said calmly, every federal agency connected to this case receives a full encrypted archive. Evelyn's eyes widened. Nathan, that could destroy half the people in the city. then maybe half the city deserves to fall. Behind us, another monitor suddenly flashed red. Incoming security alert. Evelyn moved instantly toward the screen. Camera feed. Front gate. A black SUV parked outside the property at nearly 2 a.m. 2 men sitting inside, watching the house. I recognized the posture immediately. Professionals. Victor had already made his next move. Evelyn looked at me carefully. Should I call the police? I almost smiled. No. I opened one of the locked drawers beneath the desk and removed an old silver pocket watch Eleanor gave me decades earlier. Inside the cover, her favorite sentence remained engraved beneath the glass. Never fear the truth. My thumb brushed gently across the inscription before I closed it again. Outside, the SUV headlights switched off. The men were still there, waiting, but they had no idea who they were watching tonight. Because Nathan Price, the quiet old widower they tried to erase in court, was gone now, and in his place stood the man Washington once feared enough to give a code name. Black Bishop had returned, and this time I had nothing left to lose.